Hey everybody, it's Mr. Carr again. Today we're going to be looking at our new unit on statistics and probability. Today for 7.1, we're going to talk about mostly vocab stuff, talking about designing a study here. Okay, so some of the things that we want to look at. So our key vocabulary we're looking at is in a survey, okay, data are collected from responses given by members of a population regarding their characteristics, behaviors, or opinions. Okay. So lots of times the responses are just going to be questionnaires, surveys, things like that. In an experiment, the sample is divided into two groups, an experimental and a control group. So the experimental undergoes a change, control group does not experience the change. Okay. In an observational study, members of a sample are measured or observed without being affected by the study. Okay, so simply just being watched is like simply being watched is what we're doing with that one there. Okay, so these are different types of studies that you'll see in our statistic stuff. Okay, so surveys are pretty self-explanatory. It's sometimes able to distinguish between experiment and observational study. So here's a few things. So an experiment directly interferes with whatever he or she is studying. So it's introducing something new, like a different study method or whatever it is. There are always going to be experimental and control groups with an experiment, and a treatment is applied to one group, which may influence behavior. So we're looking at those changes in behavior. Whereas an observational study, the researcher does not interfere, only watches or records whatever is already happening. And there are no experimental or control groups. It's just simply the observations there. There is no treatment applied, so there's nothing to study any changes of. Some more key vocabs would be population and sample. A population represents the entire group that you want to study. So, for example, if we're looking at the entire school and we want to maybe analyze what's going on with the entire school, we're going to pull a sample from that. Okay, so we can't really study everybody in a population, especially if it's a very large population. So the idea is that we pull a sample out of the entire population like this so that we can get a feel for what the entire group is like. Okay. So when like people run polls, a newspaper wants to predict who voters will elect it as the next president, they can't interview every single voter and get every single vote. So they're going to do a survey and randomly ask us, let's say 1,000 people. So if we have all eligible voters in the US, the sample is 1,000 people who were surveyed for this thing. So next thing I want to say is determine whether the situation described as a survey, an experiment, or an observational study. Okay. And then we're going to identify the sample and suggest a population from which it has been selected. So a record label wants to test three designs for an album cover. They randomly select 50 teenagers from local high schools to view the covers while they watch and record their reactions. Okay. So because we're just watching, this is an observational study. Observational. Okay. We have a sample. We randomly select 50 teenagers. So our sample is the 50 teenagers. Okay. So more than likely the population. So our population is probably going to be all teenagers. I would imagine someone who is looking at analyzing the album cover. They're trying to sell to us to if they're going to sample teenagers, they have a demographic that is skewed towards teenagers. So that's what we're representing. It's all potential teenagers who would buy this album. All right. City Council wants to start a recycling program. They send out a questionnaire to 200 random citizens asking what items they would recycle. So this is a survey because we have a questionnaire. Okay. Our sample is our 200 citizens. Okay. And then population that we're representing, because it's a city council, is probably just the entire city. Okay. The all citizens in the city. All right. So that's what we're looking at for that scenario. Determine whether the situation calls for a survey, an experiment, or observational study. Explain your reasoning. Blah, blah, blah. A pharmaceutical company wants to test whether new medicine is effective. So big keyword here is going to be test. We're looking at the effects of something. So this is going to be an experiment. Okay. It's a medicine. medicine or yeah, a new medicine for the pharmacy company like this, they are going to try to see what effects that has. So since we're testing, that'd be my reasoning here. We're testing effects of medicine. Okay. News organization wants to randomly call citizens to gauge opinions on a presidential election. Okay. So because we're just trying to find random opinion or randomly call citizens, we're pulling a sample out of everybody. We're just trying to get opinions here. This is going to be a survey. Okay. Because in this survey, you're just asking questions. You're just asking questions of the sample. Okay. And a research company wants to study smokers and non-smokers to determine whether 10 years of smoking affects lung capacity. This will be an observational. Okay. So we're comparing smokers and non-smokers. Okay. And we're looking at the 10 years of smoking effects on lung capacity. We are not introducing smoking to anybody. We're just already looking at, hey, here's the smokers, here's that. We kind of have an experiment, but it's not quite because we're not like, whereas we have the medicine, we're introducing the medicine to see what effects it has. Here, we're not introducing anything in this case. We're just going to be studying, we're going to look at, we're observing these different groups. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. Yeah, so observational because we're watching groups without introducing a new effect. Or yeah, new effect. Okay. So when we start looking at our surveys, we need to be careful of biased and unbiased questions. So when writing survey questions, your questions should be unbiased, meaning that they're worded in ways to be as neutral as possible. To avoid biased questions, we want to rephrase any questions that are confusing or wordy, encourage a certain response. This is a common one. Cause a strong reaction or address more than one issue. Okay. So for example, if we look at these, whether or not we can determine whether the question is biased or unbiased. If biased, explain the reasoning why, and suggest a way to improve these questions. Okay. So do you agree that cats are better than dogs? We're already kind of, this one is biased. Okay. The reason that we're saying it's biased is already coming from a place that cats are better in a way. So when it says, do you agree? It encourages. So do you agree also encourages yeah, a response that cats are better. Okay. A better question would be, do you, whoa, hello, let's not do that. Okay. Come back. There we go. Do you prefer cats or dogs? Okay. Something like that. Do you prefer Star Wars, or Star Trek? This one is unbiased. Okay. So if it's a preference between the two, then you're just saying that's it. There's no encouragement for one or the other. Should zoos release the animals that they imprison? So this one is biased because of the way that they are asking, especially by implying this with the imprison. Okay. So we're trying to go for a strong reaction here. Okay. A different way of asking this, like you could just say, should zoos exist? Okay. That one is just unbiased. You just yes or no. You can answer it on your own kind of deal on that one. Okay. And that is it for our 7.1. So these are our basics of our ideas of what we're studying. A lot of vocab to make sure we understand as we go forward into the rest of the unit, how we're understanding, very importantly, sample, population, probably biased and unbiased might come up here and there, but definitely looking at understanding samples and populations that they represent. Okay. That's it for today. Take care, everyone.